Next, from Springfield, from an event hosted by the Illinois Manufacturers Association and the Illinois Retail Merchants Association, State Senate President John Cullerton discusses the role of Illinois government policy in improving the state's business climate. This runs about 15 minutes.
Please welcome our friend, the President of the Illinois Senate, John Cullerton.
Good afternoon. Sorry I'm late. I was actually talking to the mayor of Chicago. He was very upset with me because he invited me to come and speak to the city council today. And I told him, no, I'm going to come down here, talk to you guys. So, I have had a great relationship with the Retail Merchants Association, and I've been impressed with a couple of examples of where we were able to compromise on some matters down here in Springfield. I had a particular interest over the years in trying to pass a bill to license the sale of cigarettes. And I had to wait till that Dave Veit retired so we can get some good compromise language going. So that worked out. And this year we're even following up with some trailer bills to the tobacco retail license bill. And I really appreciate the help in that. It's an example of working and cooperating. And another area that's over the years has been, I've been impressed with the fact that you've been very progressive, and that is trying to deal with the fact that there's people who've made some mistakes in their life. They've had some, maybe some minor convictions, misdemeanor convictions, and they're trying to get a job. And so over the years, we've worked with your organizations to see if we can be practical, but also see if we can get people back to work. And I want to thank you for that. Obviously, I'm pretty sure that what you'd like to hear about in the end of May is what are we going to do in the next 3 weeks. The most important thing, of course, for us to do in the state of Illinois is to pass a budget. We do it every year, eventually, and this year is obviously different because we have a Republican governor. The governor's job is to propose a budget, and then we look at it, and we modify it, and then we pass it. This year, we didn't really know what the governor was going to say in his budget address. As you know, the income tax dropped on January 1st, the individual rate from 5% to 3.75%. And so I was curious, along with many people, about what the governor's budget would be about. And what he did was to propose a budget that was purportedly balanced without having to raise any revenue. So our fiscal year starts July 1st. The fiscal year we're in right now had a drop halfway through the fiscal year of this big drop in revenue. The budget that he was proposing for next fiscal year, starting July 1st, had a full year of this lower income tax rate, and therefore there was a big drop in revenue. What he proposed, however, was not a balanced budget. He said it was, but it's not. And as a result, we have a problem. He wants to put himself in the position where he doesn't propose any tax increases. He proposes a purported balanced budget, and then says he has a turnaround agenda that we have to pass before he would consider any revenue. So that's where we are right now. If I could point out some flaws in the budget that he proposed to back up my statement that it's not balanced. We have struggled with pension reforms here in Springfield. I worked very hard with the Republicans to pass Senate Bill 1, which is currently in the Supreme Court, which cuts back people's benefits. I've raised the questions at the time we passed it that it had some constitutional problems. I don't know if it's going to be upheld, but we worked to pass it because I said I'm not on the Supreme Court. I'm not the one that's going to rule. So that's pending right now. But it's been an 18-month process. The governor proposed pension reform that would save $2.2 billion, as if we even were able to pass his proposal, nobody would sue and it wouldn't be enjoined. So the only way we could save $2.2 billion with the governor's proposal is to underfund our pensions by $2.2 billion. And that is not a good idea. That's how we got in this mess in the first place. So there's a $2.2 billion hole. Another area that we have, in the Springfield have worked on in the last 3 or 4 years has been on Medicaid reform. And give great credit to the Republicans for pushing for managed care in Medicaid. Give great credit for them in working with us to pass the SMART Act, which combined to save about $2.4 billion. A lot of pain for hospitals and nursing homes, doctors, but we did it, and we passed that bill. The governor wasn't here then, and maybe he didn't read about it in the Tribune, because that would be a positive news story that would show that we worked together down here in Springfield. So he comes in here and says, we want to save $1.5 billion in Medicaid reform. No details, but we already did this. In fact, the Medicaid budget is expected to go up just incrementally from the previous years because we've had so much success. So I don't know where that $1.5 billion would work. I do know, though, that we pay our hospitals and our doctors some of the lowest rates, Medicaid rates in the nation, and there's an issue of access where they say, we're not going to take these people anymore. Show up in the emergency room, which costs more. So that's a problem. He wants to cut group health insurance. We provide health insurance for all the university employees, all the state employees, and he negotiates that health insurance program with the unions. And he does that, not us. So if he says he can cut some phenomenal amount of money out of that, he's going to have to do that at the bargaining table. And I would just wish him good luck. By the way, that's where he says he thinks it's wrong for us to take campaign contributions from unions and then sit across the table from them and negotiate their contracts. Well, the legislature doesn't sit across from them and negotiate their contracts. He does. And if he negotiates a contract, for example, that provides them a pay raise, we have to appropriate it. So that's all on his agenda, and I would recommend that he not take any campaign contributions from those unions, and we'll be fine. Now, local governments, our mayors, county governments, they get money from the state. It goes back to 1969. We give them a percentage of the income tax. He proposed that we cut that in half. I think the mayors have made a pretty good argument that they run their cities pretty well, that most of their expenses are personnel, and a good number of their personnel are police and fire. So for us to cut $600 million out of their budgets without any warning, because many of them are in their budgets, they've signed their contracts, is not really a savings to the state, it's just a shift in cost to local government. And if it results in laying off police and fire, I don't think that's a pretty good idea. And then finally, there's another category that I think the governor's wasn't familiar with, and that is human service. Human services are provided primarily by not-for-profits. They're not unions. They are, think Misericordia, okay? And he has proposed major, major cuts to these human service providers. Now, a lot of people don't even know that the state has anything to do with those human service providers. I've had people say, well, Misericordia, that's Sister Rosemary. She has fundraisers. What does the state have to do with Misericordia? Well, you know, we provide $45 million a year for her. She provides $15 million in fundraising. And if you cut her by $6 billion, that's a 10% cut. So these are things that he has proposed. We have identified about a $5.7 to $6 billion hole in the governor's budget. He says he'll talk to us about that after we pass his turnaround agenda. Well, we definitely are going to sit down and have sat down with him on his turnaround agenda. But we also are not the only ones responsible for the budget. He is too. And so we need to find out what his plans are to fill these holes. As far as the turnaround agenda, he's talked about workers' comp reform. Once again, he wasn't here in 2011. Maybe you didn't read about this, but we had a major workers' comp reform package. And it's not easy to pass. And you know why? Guess who's against the workers' comp reform changes back in 2011? The hospitals, the doctors, the lawyers, the unions. The business community was for it, and we sat down, bipartisan fashion, and passed a major reform. There's some questions about whether the changes that we've made have been passed on to the people through their insurance premiums, which raises questions about insurance companies, actually. And we're willing to look into that and willing to look into ways in which we can possibly increase the savings or guarantee that the savings are passed on. The efforts to kind of take on the unions, I think evidence is an example of where the governor is not that familiar. I think he wasn't even familiar with the fact that there are some Republicans who are pro-union in this state. He found that out in his own primary that he almost lost. There's prison guards who are part of AFSCME who are voting Republican, and teachers in Central and Southern Illinois especially. And so I don't know that there's this same attitude among even the Republicans in the General Assembly that we are at war with the workers. You know, we in the General Assembly, I can give you some examples of where we took on the unions. They weren't happy about workers' comp reform, for example. They weren't happy about pension reforms that we passed. They weren't happy about McCormick Place reforms that we passed. We took them on. Teachers' reforms, as a matter of fact. We didn't put them out of business. We didn't say we want to put you out of business. We just said we want to talk to you, but we're not going to be doing exactly what you tell us. And so the items on this turnaround agenda, we're meeting with them. We have working groups. We're sending people there. If there's anything we can do to reach an agreement, to compromise, we're trying to do it. But my message is we also have to do a budget. It's not just our responsibility, it's his responsibility as well, and we want to continue to work together with him. And it's getting kind of late in the session. We've got a great state. I didn't agree with him when he was kind of bashing the state in his campaign. We have a state where we have something that I think is a good thing. He seems to think it's a bad thing. People in our state make more money than the people in other states. We actually make more money, about 22, 23% more than all the states that are around us. And with that money, they go to retail merchant stores, and they help the economy, and they have a higher standard of living. And we have a better educated workforce, and we have a great transportation system. These are all positive things that we have with the state that make me very proud. Now, we clearly are going to need to close this gap that I talked about. Last year, the Speaker and myself and Governor Quinn, we said we are for extending the income tax, the 5% income tax. It's lower, a 5% flat income tax is lower than many of the taxes in the states that surround us. We don't tax retirement income, and our services, our sales tax are not covered in many services. And so, but that's when it was at 5%. Now it's at 3.75%. Now we're dramatically lower than all those states. But we cannot pass a tax increase by ourselves. The Democrats can't do that. We don't have enough votes. So we are going to have to listen to the governor, and we have to listen to what his proposals are. And it's going to have to be cooperative. We're not going to try to blame each other, but we have to work together, and I'm eagerly awaiting him to come back from Chicago, come back down to Springfield, and let's work together. Thank you for inviting me today. I appreciate it.
You're watching the Illinois Channel.